My name is Juliana Nykolaiszyn with the Oklahoma State University Library. Today is Friday, July 20th, 2007, and I'm in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, interviewing Dr. Joe Anna Hibler. This interview is being conducted as part of the inductees of the Oklahoma Women's Hall of Fame Oral History Project. Dr. Hibler was inducted into the Oklahoma Women's Hall of Fame in 2007. She served as the first appointed woman president of Southwestern Oklahoma State University from 1990 to 2001, and became only the second woman in state history to lead an institution of higher education. Thank you for joining us today, Dr. Hibler.
My pleasure.
Let's begin by learning a little more about you. Could you start with where you grew up and give a little background on your early life?
I was born in Shattuck, Oklahoma, which is Ellis County. My dad was teaching in the Arnett Public Schools. I was born in May, but in August, my parents moved to Leedy, Oklahoma, which is in western Oklahoma, and that's basically where I grew up. However, when I was 4 years old, my dad was not eligible to enter the service during the war, and they hired him to be superintendent at Forgan, Oklahoma, which is in the Panhandle. And that's where I actually started to school in the first and second grade. And both my parents, public school teachers, and they decided that they didn't want to teach. And my dad had always worked for the Coca-Cola company in the summer at Perryton, Texas, where my mom grew up. And so for 1 year, we lived in Perryton. I went to the third grade. And in the spring, I can remember my dad coming in and saying, "Leedy schools have called us again. What do you think?" And Mother said, "Let's go." So we moved back to Leedy, and I was in the fourth grade. And that's where I actually grew up, graduated from high school.
Okay. When you were going to school, what were some of your favorite subjects?
I just liked school. I liked English because of Miss Andrews. She would read us wonderful stories when we were doing the literature part. I liked math. I liked the business courses, typewriting and shorthand and bookkeeping.
Is that where you started to develop your love for business?
Yes, with Mrs. Quattlebaum as my teacher.
Now, outside of school, what did you like to do for fun?
Oh, I was a tomboy. I loved to play basketball and softball, and growing up in a small town, you played all kinds of outdoor games with all the kids in town. Loved to read. I was perfectly happy to sit on the front porch with a book.
Now, did your parents ever teach at some of the schools you attended?
They taught at all of the schools that I attended. I went to school with my parents every day.
Did that pose any problems for you?
Well, I thought it did once in a while because my dad was always kind of the school disciplinarian. And, of course, my mom expected me to behave like I was supposed to. At the time, I may have thought it cramped me a little bit, but as I look back on it, it was really a good experience.
Now, at that time growing up, you're sitting on the porch reading, you're out playing, you're in school studying hard. What did you want to be when you grew up?
I had no idea. The only thing I knew I did not want to do was be a teacher, because both of my parents were teachers. Is that not usually the case? So I really didn't know. And in our house, there was no question that I was going to go to college. It was just a matter of where I was going to go. And when I graduated from high school, I was madly in love. And so I thought, I'll go to Southwestern. I had a scholarship offer and take what was called the short course. It was a 40-hour business secretarial course. And I thought that's what I'd do, and then I'd probably get married and live happily ever after. Well, I got to college and found so many wonderful things that I had to explore, that I did do the short course, but decided that I wanted to stay in school because I was involved in Student Senate. I was involved in a lot of things. And at that time, there were really kind of two things that women did. You were either a teacher or a nurse. And I certainly could not have been a nurse. So I decided I could go through the business education program, and I was not going to teach, but I would have dual use of my degree. I could go into business in some capacity, and if I ever thought I wanted to teach, I could.
How many men were in those business classes, business education classes? Were there any?
Very, very few. Very few at that time.
Now, when you're growing up, who were some of your role models that you looked up to?
Well, certainly my parents. My mother was a very strong but quiet woman, very capable. She was not teaching. She ran a White's Auto store that my folks owned for a while. Certainly my dad, who I was very close to, he coached girls basketball, and I jokingly say, yes, I played because I wanted to stay at home, but that was a close relationship. We had a female school principal, Robina Andrews. I thought that everybody had a female school principal. She lived next door to us, good friends with my folks. So in a very quiet way, she also, I think, influenced me. We had a minister at the Methodist Church, Gilbert Brothers, who took an interest in me and encouraged me in some leadership activities in the MYF. You know, when you grew up in a small town back in the 40s and 50s, everybody thought it was their responsibility to help you grow up and look after you. And that was a blessing, really. So those people, I think, probably influenced me as much as anybody.
Now, are you an only child, or do you have siblings?
I'm an only child, except when I was 15, we took a foster child into our home, and she was 5 at the time, and she finished growing up with us and went to Southwestern through the short course and did get married.
How important, on a whole, is family in your life?
Oh, very, very important. I was so fortunate to have the parents that I had and to have the home environment that I had. Very nurturing. Was always encouraged to do whatever I wanted to try to do. But we kind of had one unwritten law. If you started something, you didn't stop it. You finished. And if it was a success, then you quietly celebrated your triumph. But if it was not a success, then you talked about it and you learned from it.
Now, after you graduated from Southwestern, what did you end up doing?
Well, I went summers and winters, so I finished my undergraduate work in 3 years. I was barely 21 years old. And again, my parents and a couple of my professors, I think, knew I was not old enough to be in the classroom, mature enough, I guess I should say. And they encouraged me to apply for a graduate assistantship at OSU. At that time, OSU had a very strong business education program. So I applied for a graduate assistantship and spent the next year and summer at OSU completing my master's in business ed.
Do you have any fond memories of Stillwater you'd like to share with us? Oh,
that was a good year. Good professors. had such a good experience. And at that time, I don't know what it is now, but I taught a class each semester. So that was a good experience for me. I met one of my longtime friends, Betty Fry. She was also in business ed. She was from Arkansas. We remain friends today. But I guess it was the opportunity. I cannot stress what good instruction I had at that time, and what a good opportunity to develop professional relationship with faculty members. Lloyd Garrison in particular was a real favorite of mine, and Gordon Culver, and those are names that people who went to school at the time I did will certainly remember.
Do you remember what building you taught your class in?
Yeah, the business building, Merrill Hall.
And do you remember what it looked like inside? Could you describe for us what it looked like?
Oh gosh, it looked like every other building on college campus. But I lived in North Hall. That was the graduate dorm at that time. I don't know if it still is. And that was another wonderful experience for me, because the floor that I lived on, Betty Fry, as I mentioned, she lived across the hall from me, and we were the only two U.S. citizens living on that floor. Just worked that way, and for a little gal from a little town in western Oklahoma, that was a wonderful learning experience for me. The ladies from Pakistan and England and all over the world. And the ladies from Pakistan were in particular good for Betty and me. We both were good typists, and they hired us all year to type their papers. So we had a good built-in business.
See, it's that business mode going.
That business mode
you
going.
You were focused.
No, we just were hungry graduate students.
Did you, at that point, think you belonged in the classroom, or were you more leaning towards a more administrative role at that time?
No, I had really fallen in love with the classroom when I did my student teaching in the Cordell High School, back when I was working on my bachelor's degree. I had decided then that teaching was what I wanted to do.
What did your parents think about that?
Oh, I think they knew all along, but they were smart enough not to say anything.
Now, after OSU, what did you go on and do?
I had my first teaching job at Altus High School in Altus, Oklahoma, and at that time the junior college was incorporated in the high school, so the business courses were offered to both the high school students and the junior college students. So during the day, and my full-time job was really with Altus High School, but I always taught adjunct classes for the junior college, usually out on the Air Force Base. And I was there 4 years and loved it.
Okay. And then where did you move on after that?
In 1965, I had applied to teach in the Air Force schools overseas. I kind of had wanderlust in my heart, and Dr. Ward, who was the chairman of the business division at Southwestern, called me. He had been my academic advisor and offered me a job to teach at Southwestern. I was back before you had to apply and all, and I really struggled in deciding what I was going to do, because I had been accepted by the Air Force, but they couldn't tell me where I would go, and I would go for 3 years. And as I said, I struggled, but I finally decided that I would go back to my alma mater and teach business.
Now, how did that feel, returning back home where you got that bachelor's degree? What was going through your mind?
Well, I walked in and there were all my professors that all of a sudden were my colleagues. And It could have been very awkward, but it was not. They were very accepting, and I tried very hard not to in any way rub them the wrong way as a returning student, so to speak. And they were most kind and helpful, and interestingly enough, I shared an office with the one faculty member that I had not gotten along with when I was a student. And, you know, as maturity helps, I ended up loving that lady.
What classes did you teach?
Oh, let's see. I taught typewriting. I taught business communications. And I once in a while would teach shorthand. I was not a good shorthand teacher. For one thing, I'm left-handed. And part of the learning process is in a visual learning mode. And so my left hand was awkward and backward for most of the students. I was trying to think what else. Oh, I taught what was called secretarial training, and I taught an office machines course.
Now, after your time in the classroom at Southwestern, where did you move on next?
Well, I spent all of my career at Southwestern. I did take 2-year sabbatical from 69 to 71, and I was at the University of Oklahoma working on my doctorate. And while I was there, I was hired as what they called a special instructor in the College of Business Administration. But when I returned from my sabbatical, I returned to the classroom, but I also served as chair of the Office Administration and Business Education Department. That was really my first administrative experience, and it was a dual appointment with teaching responsibility.
What prompted you to go and get your EDD?
At that time, regional schools like Southwestern were in a mode that they were encouraging their faculty to go and study and receive a doctorate. And there was a pay increase, a healthy pay increase. I think at that time it was $3,000, and in the 70s that was quite a bit of money. And I guess I was smart enough to know that I was young enough, and if I was going to stay in higher ed for a career, then I needed my doctorate. You know, we jokingly say it was our union card, but in a sense it is.
So now you have some teaching responsibility and you have some administrative functions. What did you like more?
The classroom. Very honestly, that's the best job there is. I enjoyed the administrative responsibilities. I don't really realize it, but I guess I am one of those people that kind of likes to be in control and run things, although it was not just something that was glaringly obvious to me. But I didn't mind the responsibility, kind of enjoyed being in a position where I knew what was going on.
Did, at that time, Southwestern have many women in administrative roles?
No, none.
So how, did you have any challenges as you started to take on these new responsibilities?
I can honestly say I didn't. People were very professional. They were very good about recognizing if you did a good job. Either that or I was so dumb not to be able to recognize it, but I never did really feel any adversity or any attempt to throttle me in any way. I was always encouraged by the dean or the vice president or the president.
Now, at what point did you move out of the classroom and totally into an administrative role?
Interestingly enough, I never did leave the classroom. I even taught a class as the president.
Wow.
But my really full-time administrative responsibility is when I was promoted to serve as dean of the School of Business. That was my full-time job, but during that time I developed a class for our graduating seniors that we called professional development. And it was a class on where do you find a job, how do you get a job, and how do you keep a job, and how do you live on what you're earning.
Now, can you describe some of the most important places where you learned the background you needed for your career in education?
Gosh, I think that just came with each job. And the various opportunities that I was given. I was one of these that would volunteer for a lot of things, just simply because I was interested. Sometimes I was guilted into doing something that would turn out to be a good experience. And sometimes just working with people who have good leadership skills, you just learn from them. You pattern after them.
Can you go into a few key moments in your career that you consider major highlights for you?
Well, certainly when I was appointed president, that was certainly a highlight because at that time I was serving as the Vice President for Academic Affairs, which, by the way, is probably the toughest job I had in all of the different jobs I had. And I was very content doing that. But Dr. Leonard Campbell was president at Southwestern at that time. He had announced his retirement. And he really is the one that encouraged me strongly to apply for the president's job. I really was not expecting to get the appointment, just simply because there had not been a woman president. And so many times, and I'm generalizing, but a Board of Regents, their thinking is that we should bring someone in new, that if there's someone on campus, it's going to be status quo. And I remember when I had my interview, that was one thing that I really tried to stress was that if I was hired, it was not going to be status quo, that there were some things that I wanted to try to do. So certainly that was a highlight when that call came that morning and Regent Wynn asked me if I would accept it, if it was offered. And having the opportunity to call my mom and tell her, my dad had passed away earlier. While I was working as president, 2 or 3 things that were really highlights in my career. One is we took the Southwestern Foundation, which basically was just in name only, in case somebody came by and wanted to make a contribution. We had around $800,000. When I retired, there was $7 million there, so I felt very good about that. We did 2 capital campaigns that had never been done at Southwestern, and we built a lot of alumni friends. We brought a lot of alumni back to campus, and I feel good about that. Southwestern is known for its school pharmacy, and we had tried for nearly 20 years to have a doctorate of pharmacy approved. We were edging toward that time when the National Licensing Board was going to say, if you don't have a doctorate, you can't be licensed. So it was critical that Southwestern get that program approved. And we did. And that was certainly a highlight because that's been the icing on the cake at Southwestern, the School of Pharmacy. So, there were so many things. We were leaders in I'm losing the term, but with our Sayre campus and Weatherford campus with interactive video there. Finally get that out. The day we opened the broadcast was wonderful.
It's very cutting edge.
It was at the time. But those are the kind of things that I think a university president has to have in his or her life to kind of offset the everyday, not bad, but less than stimulating things going on.
You became the first woman in a 55-year span. It's a huge span to serve as the president of the University in Oklahoma. It's 2007 now, and women in Oklahoma now lead 4 out of 25 public universities.
I know, isn't that exciting?
Can you describe your feelings on this issue? Do you feel that there are more opportunities now for women to crack that barrier in leading colleges and universities serving as president?
Yeah, I think there are more opportunities. Sadly, however, I don't see that many women in positions where perhaps they can move into those presidential positions because you have to have some background, you have to have some credentials. I don't think a woman has as near the chance in Oklahoma of, saying, coming out of the private sector and just being appointed a president as a man does and has been. I think women still have to kind of go through the steps. But I do think there are more opportunities. I think it's becoming pretty normal thing to do to have women in those positions. With 4 of them, I just think it's wonderful. And interestingly enough, you mentioned the 55 years. My appointment was made in the Kate Zanuck conference room at Southeastern, and that was the first woman to serve as a president in Oklahoma.
Wow, what an honor that is.
I know, isn't that interesting? Good history there.
Oh, yes. You mentioned earlier that you thought that having that vice president of academic affairs job was extremely, had a lot of challenges, maybe some more so than being president.
Yeah.
What were some of the challenges you encountered?
Well, as is most of the administrative jobs on a university campus, you're dealing with personnel matters. But that particular position, you're really in the middle. You're answering to the president. So I probably had less authority as a vice president of academic affairs than I did as dean of the School of Business, because I was working very closely with the president. Also, you're dealing with faculty issues and academic programs, which are the heart of your university. And if your academic programs are strong, then they're constantly changing. And whether it's accreditation matters or whether you're trying to hire quality faculty or whether you're trying to determine tenure and promotion recognition, those are just tough issues in my estimation. What
is your advice for a woman who is involved in higher education administration, what steps should a woman take if they aspire to be a university president?
I think the more exposure that you can get to different people and different situations will make you a stronger candidate. For example, the university president, you have to have some fundraising experience. You need to have academic experience. You need to be able to work with the community. You need to recognize that students are the heart and soul of that campus. And you need to realize that you're responsible for the lives and livelihood of a lot of people. And I think you can do a better job if you have taken advantage of all the different opportunities that come along. You serve on the different committees. You make sure that you're active in your community so that you get to know people, you get to know the situations. I think that's critical.
Now, when you were notified that you were going to be inducted into the Oklahoma Women's Hall of Fame, tell me what was going through your mind at that time.
Well, of course, I was very honored when the call came, but I also, I thought, oh my gosh, I've been retired 6 years. I'm not really doing much that's worthwhile. But then, vanity took over, and I quickly thought, gosh, this is going to be nice that some of the things that I worked hard for will be recognized.
What does this type of honor mean to you? You've been recognized by so many organizations for your work in higher education. At the end of the day, what does this mean to you?
Well, it means a whole lot because I'm biased, but I think women are many times better judges and tougher judges of one's accomplishments and one's contributions. And this organization has prestige with it. And so it was a very nice honor to be recognized by this particular group.
How do you feel that now women in both the classroom, as teachers, as administrators, are now looking at you as that role model?
Well, I'm humble about the opportunities that I've had, but if I'm realistic, I do know that I've made a little bit of difference, and my successes have allowed, I think, other women to maybe have some opportunities that those doors might not have opened as easily as they have opened. And I don't mean that in a bragging way. I just think we all know that if you see a success, it makes it a little easier for the next person that comes along.
Can you tell me something about the people you would like to thank that helped play an important role in your life?
Oh my. Well, I would start with my parents always, because they were such good role models and were awfully good about saying no when no needed to be said, although at the time I didn't appreciate it. Interestingly enough, most of the people have been men. For example, I probably would not have gone on to OSU and I worked on my master's at the time I did if it had not been for Dr. Ward and Mr. Crouch at Southwestern. When I got to OSU, as I mentioned, Lloyd Garrison and Gordon Culver were very encouraging to me. And I had an opportunity years later to continue working with them in the National Business Education Association. When I got to OU, Gerald Porter was very influential, and he was a national figure in business ed. Back on the Southwestern campus, I cannot stress enough the help that President Leonard Campbell was to me as a role model and also as a mentor. And I don't mean to discount, but just because the positions that I was in and there weren't other women in them, it really was men that pretty much encouraged and promoted my career.
If you could give any piece of advice to fellow Oklahomans, what would you tell them?
I'd tell them to be proud of who they are and to embrace what I think is the prairie spirit in Oklahoma, and to look at all the good things that we've got in this state. Doesn't mean we don't have things that need to be repaired and fixed and promoted, but as an Oklahoman, I'm proud of who I am and where I am.
What does Oklahoma mean to you?
Home, friendly people, hardworking people, kind of a, well, as I said, a kind of a prairie spirit, a little bit of a wild spirit.
When history is written about you, what would you like for it to say?
Oh my. I guess that she was honest. She was fair. She had a sense of humor, but I plan to take that with me.
Well, it's 2007. What are you currently working on, and what's next on the agenda for you?
Well, I do a lot of nothing as a retiree, but I am very involved with the Women's Foundation of Oklahoma, which is a relatively new endeavor in our state. We're working to set up $1 million endowment and our mission is to help women become economically self-sufficient and to help girls in our state have a brighter future. I'm also involved with the Thomas P. Stafford Air and Space Museum in Weatherford, serving on their advisory board and helping as a volunteer. I work as a board member on the Oklahoma United Methodist Foundation. I have the last 5 years volunteered with the Early Bird program at Bertram Elementary School, go out at 7:30 and read with a first grader. So those are the kind of things that I still do so that I feel a little bit worthwhile and have some responsibilities. But I like to travel, like to spend time with cousins that I spent a lot of time with as a child. And we've kind of reconnected with all of us retiring and having some free time. So, and as I said, if I can sit on the back porch with a good book, that's still fun to me.
You sound like a busy retiree.
Well, you know, people will ask, they say, oh, I bet you're busier than you were when you were working. No. As a university president, you stay awfully busy. So this seems like leisure time to me.
You're also currently serving with the Oklahoma Board of Regents?
Yes, the Regional University system of Oklahoma, serving as a regent for the 6 original regional schools.
And how has that experience been?
That's really a good experience, an interesting experience. I have to be careful and realize I'm wearing a regent's hat and not a president's hat. But I find it very interesting to be on that side of the table. And I must say the other 8 people who serve on that board are lay people and very conscientious about their responsibilities.
I was going to ask you if you miss being in the classroom, but I see you've already, still hang out in there.
I at least once a semester, sometimes twice a semester, someone at Southwestern is kind enough to ask me to come up and teach a class for them for a day or 2 days, and I love it. That's still the best place to be.
What are some of your favorite topics you like to discuss nowadays in the classroom?
Well, of course, most of the time it's on leadership and administration, and my friends will laugh at this, the last couple of semesters I've taught a class on etiquette to the business students. For example, the leadership class was getting ready to have dinner at the governor's mansion. And so the teacher, who was one of my former students, she said, "You've gone to more banquets than anybody I know." And, it's been fun. I had to get my Emily Post book out, but gosh, I guess I'm so desperate. If somebody calls me to teach a class, I'll teach it.
How has business education changed over the years?
Oh, big time. So much of it is tied to technology now. Although when I finished my doctorate, the 2 of the areas that I taught in that were new to me were personnel management and office management. The basic concepts have stayed the same, but technology, the computer has just incorporated into every aspect. Shorthand is no longer taught. Accounting is computerized. You still have to have the concepts, but it's changed big time. I couldn't teach a business course today. I would have to really go back and restudy and retrain.
Do you still own a typewriter?
I do. I have a computer, but I did not give up my IBM Selectric. I used it yesterday to fill out the form you sent me.
That's great. I was wondering because we don't even consider typewriters anymore in our daily business life. So.
Not at all. And one of the courses that I taught too was methods of typewriting. In other words, teaching teachers how to teach typewriting. Well, it's keyboarding now, so see, I'd even have to get the new label in my mindset.
What characteristics does a good leader have?
Well, I think you first and foremost have to be honest with yourself and with other people. I think you have to be willing to listen and consider everything that's said to you. Doesn't mean that you agree, but you listen and you consider. I think you have to know that most of what you are going to accomplish in some fashion is going to be a compromise. I think it helps if you like people, if you enjoy seeing things happen, if you're willing to work hard. Those are the things that I think will get you the furthest for the longest time as a leader.
Well, now I can see why you've taught so many leadership classes.
Well, thanks. It's fun. It really is. You know, if you're just living your life and going about your daily activities, I don't think you're really conscious about the effect you may have on somebody or the opportunities that you've had. I think a busy person is usually so busy that you don't take time to really step back and kind of celebrate the things that that have happened that are good and productive. It's just there, you do it, and tomorrow's another day with some more challenges or opportunities.
After all you've accomplished in pioneering, several roles in higher education, how do you measure success?
I measure success when I get up in the morning, I look in the mirror and I'm okay with what I see. And when it's time to go to bed at night, I sleep like a baby. Those are probably the two best measuring sticks I have. I can look back and I can recognize accomplishments, but I think I'm not successful if I don't feel right within myself.
And I just have one more question, and if there's anything I haven't covered today, I'd love to give you the opportunity, if you have anything you'd like to add at this time, to share with us.
Thank you. I really don't. I appreciate the opportunity to visit with you, and I certainly appreciate the recognition that the Women's Commission has given me. And if there's anything that I've done that somebody can learn from, successes or failures, they're welcome to give it a whirl.
Well, thank you very much for sharing your story with us today.